Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Conversation podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fermantis. I hope you're all having a great summer. And I'm really excited to do this podcast episode today because I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm really passionate about. And that topic is reading. Now, if you know me, you've probably heard me talk about reading a lot, or I have at least mentioned it a couple of times. I have a lot of quotes that I like about reading, and I have a lot of books that I love and am in the middle of reading or have read. And I just want to take the time to reflect on those. And I want to use this podcast as an opportunity to share some of the books that I love. And hopefully, you find something that you might want to read, or you become inspired to search for a book or search for a genre that you want to read yourself. I'm currently recording this episode in the summer, and if you're like me, when I grew up, my school and my library had these summer reading challenges. I remember sometimes my mom would take me to the local public library during the summer to complete some of the challenges that they had. So every single year, my library had like a certain theme when it came to summer reading, and they would have these activities based on the theme for the kids to participate in and enjoy. But even during those times, I didn't really take reading seriously, or at least not as seriously as I would have liked. And I think part of that is because, you're a kid and you don't really like being told what to do or being told to do something like reading a book over the summer when all you want to do is just play and forget about school for a couple of months. But as I've grown older and now that I've graduated college, I've realized more and more the importance of reading and the importance of self development. And that's why I'm so passionate about reading, because I believe that reading is so important, and it's something that we as human beings need to do in order to develop ourselves, in order to improve ourselves. Growing up, you had a ton of people telling you to read different books, whether it be your parents or your friends or your teachers. You've been told by people to read books because, let's get to the point, reading books is important. I'm currently on summer break. I'm sure I have my grad classes. My grad classes are actually about to end this week. And I also have work, which is now going to be a constant thing for my adult life. And I am making sure that I take this summer to actually read. So, unlike when I was a kid growing up during the summer, kind of taking summer reading like, oh, I should do this because it's fun. And, my teachers are telling me to do this and my parents are telling me to do this. Fast forward to now where I am sitting down and telling myself, I want to read, and I want to read so that I can become a better person, a better version of myself. So now I'm taking that concept of summer reading from childhood and actually just taking it into reading and reading for the rest of my life. Another thing I want to mention is that I'm a Christian. I'm very open about that. My faith is very important to me. So growing up, I read a lot of books related to faith, and I still do. I have a huge collection of those books in my bookshelf, and I have a lot of those books that I still have yet to read. I like to collect books. And I know that's an interesting thing to say because a lot of people collect baseball cards, or they collect shoes, or they collect other things. I collect books. I have a huge stash of books that I have yet to get through. But the great thing is I will always have something to read. And so the grind never stops. There's always going to be books that are going to come out that you are going to want to read, that I am going to want to read. And so it's just this endless supply of information. We tend to think of the internet in that way, but I've come to realize that even books are an endless supply of information. Like, there's a ton of books, and it's impossible to read all the books that there are in the world. But we're going to do our best I'm going to do my best to read what I can and take away lessons from those books. I've never personally liked fiction. I like nonfiction books. I like books with concepts and lessons that I can take away that doesn't necessarily have the storyline. And I know that's a bit weird since I studied communications, and in communications all about story, and I'm reading a book about story right now. But for some reason, I've never been a fan of fiction books aside from a couple. One was the Divergent series, which has a horrible ending, by the way. But the Divergent series was something that I was interested in. I read all of the three books, and then I think Veronica Roth came out with the spin off about one of the characters, and I tried to read it, and I didn't really end up reading it because I was kind of near the end of my interest, and so I wasn't really interested by the time that it came out. My interest kind of waning off from the series, and but I like that series, and I also like the Hunger Games. I've read the books. I'm not like a Hunger Games fanatic. Like, if you were to come up to me and ask about specifics of the book, I wouldn't really know. And now that I think about it, not even Divergent, because I haven't read that in a bit. I recently read it like a couple months back, and I actually found a lot of problems with it. Now that I'm looking at it through an older lens, I was kind of like, I feel like that's a weird way to take the story or whatnot, but that's just my critiques. Anyhow, I'm not like the biggest fan of fiction. Like, I don't mind it, but it's not really what I read. I read a lot of nonfiction books. I read a lot of books about personal development and business and design because that is where my interest lies. But you gotta find what works for you, you know? I understand a concept of reading as it relates to personal development. I believe that we have to read because we need to develop as people. And why should we develop as people? Well, I believe that all of us here on this earth are here for a specific reason, and we need to better ourselves in order to accomplish that task. Like, we each have so much potential, and I want to live up to my potential. I want to be the best I can be, not for myself and not for other people, but for God first and foremost. So I can do the things that He wants me to do here on this earth. And so I'm playing my role in that by developing myself to be the best version of myself that I can be. Can just also believe that you are here on this earth, and you have to make an impact on this earth. You want to leave a positive impact behind wherever you are. And so you can think of it as bettering yourself in order to make that impact. We each have the ability to make this world a better place. Why not do that? And even if it's in just a small way, maybe just in your workplace or at your school, or at your local nonprofit or whatnot, why pass on that opportunity? Why just sit and go through the motions of life when you can actually do something good in the world? I watched this video about this person who was talking about a lot of the hustle, quote unquote, hustle culture videos that you see on YouTube, and how it's all these people, having these extremely out of the ordinary goals, right? And I'll admit a lot of it is ridiculous. There was this one video my boss showed me about this guy claiming that he divided his day into 3 days, and so he lives like 3 days every single day. A lot of it is just ridiculous, and I don't even know where it comes from. But I think there's a lot of basic concepts in there where people are striving to be better. The basic concept out of all those, videos about, oh, become an entrepreneur and all of that is just being better while doing something that you love. And so I think that looks different for a lot of different people. I don't believe everyone should be an entrepreneur. I don't believe everyone should go into business. I believe that you find your passion, hone your passion, and do what you love, and that's what you should do. Do what you love. Find what piques your interest and do that. And so that's what I did with graphic design. I chose to go into graphic design on a whim. All the other colleges I applied to, aside from Quinnipiac, where I recently graduated, I applied as a business major. QU was the only school that I applied to as a graphic design major. I took that chance. I went with it. Why? Because I grew up interested in design. I grew up looking at church bulletins and billboards and ads and all of that. I was just interested. And so I just went with my gut. I went with that. And now this is where I am. And it's a passion of mine. And it's how I make a living, which is just great. So I understand reading in terms of personal development. My pastor talks about leadership all the time. And one of the quotes he always uses is, readers are leaders. So if you're going to be a leader and if you're going to be a world changer, you're going to make an impact in the community around you, you have to read. It sounds simple enough. You need to read, you need to educate yourself, and you need to take the concepts out of what you read and apply them into your life. Now, I also heard another quote growing up, and I don't agree with this quote fully, but it's something that is interesting to me. And the quote is: never trust a person with a television larger than their bookshelf. Now, the reason I don't necessarily agree with that 100% is because you have to have actually read the books on the bookshelf and applied what you learned into the books into your life in order for that to have a bigger impact than, say, the size of your television. So I take that quote with a grain of salt, but I agree with the underlining concept, which is that you should be spending more time reading and learning than entertaining yourself. And so I value that importance. I put learning and reading and education above entertainment. That's just a thing for me. I don't really watch television, and if I do watch television, it's YouTube videos that are educational in nature, that are inspiring, that are motivational, but also have a lot of meat and substance. So now that I'm older, I value the importance of reading it even more, and I'm challenging myself to read more, not just this summer, but also beyond. And I think that you should read as well. So if you're watching this episode, I hope you feel inspired to read. And I hope that we can go on this reading journey together because it's just so, so important. I think we need to read new ideas, we need to read interesting things, and we also need to read things that we might disagree with. And that's perfectly fine. And the reason I include that is because we need to understand other people's perspectives. There's a lot of division happening in the world right now, especially in this country. And I think if we actually sat down and had discussions rather than debates, we would actually be more peaceful and more unified and would actually, get along with other people. We need to have a new understanding of empathy and perspective and respect and discussion in this country. Debates don't get us anywhere. Debates never change anyone's mind, but discussions and open, respectful discussions do. And I think we need to return to that. That's just not, that's not political or anything. That's just humanity. I think we need to sit down and have a lot more discussions and a lot more understanding. I think reading other people's ideas and other people's opinions and perspectives on the world and issues in the world, or ideas that are heavily discussed and debated, can actually help us to formulate our own perspectives. And so that's why I think it's important to read things from even people that you disagree with on a broad level. I think you actually need to sit down and read what their actual thoughts on a topic before you formulate your own decision. And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a different perspective, but you always got to be respectful. So now that I've said that, I want to insert a couple disclaimers about how I read. I don't really like specifics. I like broad concepts. So when I read, I place understanding the concepts at the forefront. And I think that if you can understand the concept and are able to regurgitate and call that information back to mind and use that in your life, then you've actually learned the material. I don't like specific vocabulary terms. I don't like specific names and stuff. Like even when I work in graphic design, when I'm working in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, I don't memorize the terms of a lot of things. I memorize the icons and I know what the icons do, or I know what this word does. And so that's a problem for me because sometimes when someone's asking me how to do something in those programs, I can't really articulate it. One, because it's just, one of my inner senses. I've been trained to know what to do in those programs. It's not easy for me to explain. But second, because I don't necessarily memorize those terms. Now, that is somewhat problematic, but that's actually how I think of things. I think of things in a broad sense, in concepts and topics rather than very, very specific things. And I think that's important to understand because you are reading with the purpose of taking away something that you can use in your life or in your career, right? So you don't necessarily need to understand that teeny tiny details and be able to say the details of everything that was discussed, but you should be able to come back from reading to you should be able to take away something on a broad and conceptual level that you can implement. So personally, I like broad, not specific. I like to think of broad ideas and items, and that's why I consider myself to be both a creative and a visionary. Another disclaimer is that I have a lot of partially read books. So I'm going to actually show you some books that I'm currently reading, some books that I have yet to read. But I think that even if you've never finished the book, you can still take something away from it. I think it's important that we actually finish the books that we're reading, but just reading some of it is better than not reading it at all. And I think a lot of people cheat themselves out of learning concepts and ideas by spark noting things. The spark notes is already the summarized version of what you're reading, but I think you should actually read what is in the text for you to formulate your own idea, your own perspective, and use that. The spark notes are someone else's takeaways, but if you read the book for yourself, you can come away with your own perspective. I want to take this part of the episode to show you some of the books that I'm currently reading and some books that I have yet to read or fully read. And I hope that I can inspire you to read some of these books or find something that interests you that you want to read, or you become inspired to search for a genre, a book, or something that you want to read. My main takeaway and hope for this episode is to get you to start reading, because reading is so important. So here are some books that I'm currently reading. All right, so first up, we have Building a Story Brand, and it's by this person named Donald Miller. And so I actually heard of this book from one of my professors. I took a branding class in college. And what the book is actually talking about is creating a story for your brand, because people love stories. It's a marketing book. And it's talking about, positioning your brand and creating a story for your brand that people can relate to, or where people can see themselves as the hero. And so my boss actually asked me to read it, and he gave me this copy of the book. My boss actually gave me his copy of the book, and so I'm reading through it now. I'm not very far into it. I'm only maybe at like the second or third chapter so far, but I'm learning a whole lot, and I'm really digesting this book. Like, I'm thinking about the concepts that I'm learning and thinking about how I can implement it, not just in my job, but in everything as it pertains to my career and as it pertains to communication and things that I'm doing for content creation. And so if you're into marketing or whatnot, or communications or any of that, I highly recommend this book. I'm not even finished with it, and I think it's already super, super valuable and a must read. Another thing I want to just say very quickly is that this episode is not sponsored at all. I am not at the point in my podcasting career where people would actually sponsor me for stuff. So these are all my personal recommendations and highlights. So nothing is sponsored here. I'm not getting anything from this. I can assure you that. This second book is called Why Fonts Matter. I have really yet to start this. I've looked through it. It was given to me by one of my professors to read through and implement into a project that I'm working on. But it talks all about fonts and typefaces, and I think it's just a very interesting read, especially if you're a graphic designer like myself. We work with words all the time, and it's so important that we learn how to work with words and text on both, printed and digital formats. It's such an essential to learn. Any graphic designer needs to know how to work with words. And so I'm very interested in seeing what's in this book, and I'll get to back. I'm very interested in seeing what's in this book, and I'll get back to y'all once I've read it. This is the big one. And this is one that I actually read through a while back. I read through it during my first year of college. I saw it at the local Barnes and Noble. It was the only copy, and I was like, Mom, Dad, I have to get this. And plus, it was the updated version. Many graphic designers will know this book and know this person. It is called How To by Michael Beirut. Now, if you don't know who Michael Beirut is, he is one of the best graphic designers living in the world today. And this is his monograph, which is basically a collection of all his best works, and he authored it himself. And so in this book, I'm actually going to show some of it, but there's so many examples of stuff that he's done, and it's just crazy to see as a graphic designer. Like, there is so much I can research in this book. There's a lot of inspiration that I can get from this guy's style, and plus he writes about his work in this book as well. So if you're a graphic designer or interested in art, design, creative fields, any of this, I really highly encourage you to get this book, because you're going to see graphic design in a new and expanded light. He talks a lot about the importance of graphic design. One of the stories he routinely shares, even in one of his TED Talks that I watched, was the election ballot in Florida back in 2000 and how poorly the design was, and that's why they had to do all the recounts and whatnot back in 2000, right? And so it's just basically, he basically argues for the importance of design, and this book really showcases the importance of design and how to use it to basically change the world. So I highly recommend this. It's a very thick book, very pricey book too, but it's a worthwhile read, I can assure you that. This next book is awesome. For all of my marketing and social media manager, social media content creation friends out there, you gotta read Day Trading Attention by Gary Vee. Listen, I know a lot of people either love Gary Vaynerchuk or hate Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm kind of in the middle. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says or does. But this book is still a fabulous read for anyone who is interested in knowing how to do social media and content creation this year and in the next coming years. It really is his argument on how to use social media. It's everything that he talks about all compiled into one book and more. Like, he's sharing a lot of ideas that he doesn't necessarily elaborate on in his content, and it's all here in this book. And there's a lot of actual concepts and meat and lessons that any social media manager or person in content creation can take away. And so this book is actually just came out a couple months ago. There's so much in it already, and I'm digesting it super, super slowly. So if you're into social media and all of that, get this book. It's a must read. Another book that I'm reading, and it's kind of interesting actually, because I was asked to read this book for one of my graduate level classes. It was an assigned reading. It's not a textbook, it's an actual book, but it's called Likeable Social Media by this person named Dave Kirpin. It talks a lot in specifics. It discusses a lot of things that are specific to social media. I'd say I feel like some of it might be a bit outdated, but the overarching concepts are still there and they're still applicable. There are a lot of older screenshots in this, and it's not really my favorite social media book. But I think there is some useful information in this, and I think that if you like information, if you like kind of those specifics, then this is a book for you. It's not necessarily my favorite, but I applaud it, and I think it's still a good read. So check it out. We have a very thick book over here, and it's called The Complete 101 Collection by John C. Maxwell. If you don't know who John Maxwell is, look him up. He is the leadership guru. He is the leadership dude. He has written and authored so many books about leadership, and this is a book that compiles a lot of his quote-unquote 101 lessons. So attitude, self-improvement, leadership, relationships, success, teamwork, equipping, mentoring. I've only been reading through the attitude and mentoring ones, but I want to get through all of this. Like, there is a ton of valuable insight in this book, and I can't wait to read all of it, because this is just valuable insight for any leader, for any person who's in the business space or any space, actually, I think. So this, when you read something like this, you want to really digest it and hone in on what it's saying. And I actually listened quite recently to a podcast with John Maxwell, in which he stated like when he reads books, he reads it multiple times because he wants to understand the concepts that are in the book so that he can use it later on. And so that's actually how I'm approaching both this book and a lot of the other books. So it doesn't necessarily matter how fast you read. I think it's even more important to read slowly. So you actually step back from the book with a broad understanding that you can implement into your daily life. And so don't try to be a fast reader, be a slow reader and actually understand what's in the book. It is the Bible. Um, I was raised Christian, and my faith is very, very important to me. And I've just been growing a lot in my faith over the past couple of months. A lot of that is from my church. So my church just recently rebranded. It's 22 months old, and we're moving into a new building. And people are coming in. We actually had to move to 3 services because a lot of people are coming in, and God's just doing amazing things. But we have this drive for growing in our faith and experiencing the more that God has for us. And so I've been taking a lot of time over the past couple months to read through the New Testament, which is not actually something that I've done before. And so far, as I'm making this podcast episode, I am currently in the book of Hebrews, and you can see my highlights in there. I wasn't really a fan of highlighting my Bible for a long time because I'm one of those people, and it's not just Bibles, but any book in general. I don't like, to ruin the pages, quote unquote, ruin the pages, right? But I found that highlighting scripture actually helps me to meditate and reflect on it more. Because there are certain verses in scripture that just stand out to me. And so my tip for people of faith and people who are not of faith alike, you can use this with any book really, is don't be afraid to highlight it. Now, of course, don't go to the library and highlight the book that you borrow from the library. But if you own the book, don't be afraid to jot down notes or highlight parts of it that you like. Because at the end of the day, it's, your copy of the book. So use it and turn it into your copy. I love the Bible. If you are a Christian, you need to read your Bible every single day. You need to spend time in the Word every single day because God is speaking something, especially in these days. And we need to be on high alert, and we need to read what is in Scripture. We need to know what God is saying to us. Now I'm going to go into books that I have yet to read or fully read. And I actually have a lot of these, but I'm only going to show 4 of them. I've read some of the stuff in these books, and I think it's super valuable. And I've actually taken stuff in these books and implemented them in my life, and I've seen the results. The first book is a very popular book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Don't let the title fool you. This is a leadership book. This is a sales book. This is a personal development book, and it's taught me so much about dealing with people and leading people and influencing people. And it's a classic. Like, people know this book. You say How to Win Friends, Influence People, people know about this book. It is a must read. I've not read all of it, but I really want to because I put into practice a lot of the things that are in this book and have seen the positive effects of it. So if you're interested in learning how to deal with people, how to deal with situations, and how to be a leader, this is a must read. Read it. That being said, it is a bit not outdated. The concepts are there and they're important regardless of time, but there are some things, some like examples and whatnot that obviously are from the 1900s. Just be weary of that. But take the concepts and implement them into modern day. All right. The next book is actually one that I really, really love. And I've actually met this person. He gave a talk at my school, and he actually signed this book. It's called Build for Tomorrow by Jason Pfeiffer. I'm sorry, Jason, if you're watching this. But this is a really good book about exactly what it says. future proofing your career. He talks a lot about change in industries and careers, and how, all these technological stuff is always changing and impacting people, and then people freak out and they quote unquote panic, and then eventually everything settles down, things get better. Yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about. And so if you're in a career or industry where things are always rapidly changing, and you want to, exactly what he says, future proof your career, this is a must read. This has helped me a lot in graphic design, especially lately with the rise of AI. Understanding how you can use the changes to benefit yourself, not to be scared of it, not to be scared of innovation, but to actually embrace innovation and use it in a positive way and do it in a positive way. That's exactly what this book talks about. I've read most of it. Contrary to what this bookmark says, I'm actually more than halfway through. And so he actually signed it. And, Jason is such an amazing guy. In that time that I met him, and I still follow his content up to the day, he wrote, "Sean, keep building." And so, this is just one of three books that I have signed by the actual author. Four, actually. But the three I'm talking about, I actually met the person and they signed in front of me. And this is just one of those. So thank you, Jason. Hi guys, so little bit of a break happened between the last video and this video. So what happened is my phone is completely out of storage, and so it stopped recording while I was reviewing that book. And so I'm airdropping that video to my Mac so I can delete it off the phone, but it's been like almost an hour now, and it's still airdropping. I don't know why it's taking so long, but I want to get this podcast done so I can wrap it up before the sun goes down. So I am recording this next part of the podcast on my iPad so that I can finish this episode. I'm just going to combine the two together. I have one more book here that I want to talk about, and it is this book called Experimental Type. It's actually an issue of, I think, a magazine called Slanted. I bought this when I was in Italy. I stopped by a design studio in Milan. I took a week-long study abroad trip to Italy, and so we stopped by a design studio in Milan, and I ended up buying this book. And so it has actually a lot of different pieces of work pertaining to experimental typography. It's like an issue of a magazine of some sort. But man, there's just so much inspiration that I can get out of this a ton. It's not necessarily something I read from front to back, but I think I really want to hone in on everything that's in here and just look at every single page and study every single page. I mean, look at this. Like, this is crazy. This is amazing. Crazy good. So that's that. Anyway, this is the conclusion of this episode. If you take away anything from this episode, it's to read, because reading is important. We can't give up on reading. We just have to read constantly, because we need to better ourselves as human beings. We need to do better, we need to learn more, and we need to embrace other people's perspectives alongside formulating our own. So that's really this episode today. I highly enjoyed getting to show you my book collection. And so I want to know, do you want me to do more episodes like this where I talk about books? Do you want me to give you some more book recommendations? Let me know. Follow me on my account at Conversasean Podcast on Instagram. And just give me some feedback. What do you want from the podcast? Did you like this episode? I hope you did, because I really love this. Well, thanks again, and thanks for bearing with me with this different look. I promise you the next podcast is going to be one seamless looking thing, but hey, we worked with what we got, right? All right, well, I'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.